It's September 2025 and I'm by the Neckar River in an ancient university city that's home to the most youthful population in Germany. Located on both sides of the Neckar and Ammer rivers, just 30 kilometres south of the state capital of Stuttgart, the city of Tübingen is home to one of Germany's leading universities, which means a third of the city's population are a student, giving the city the youngest median age in Germany. Whilst the city now spreads across both banks of the Neckar River, the medieval old town of Tübingen is located on the north bank, climbing rapidly up the hill from the riverside to the castle on the Schlossberg in the west and the Osterberg in the east. Towards the edge of the Roman Empire, there are traces of their occupation in the area, but the continued settlement of the area itself dates from the 6th or 7th century, when the Alemanni people settled in the Neckar Valley. The earliest mention of the city is in documents on the city's castle, the Schloss Hohentübingen, dating back to 1078, when it was besieged by Henry IV, King of Germany, indicating there was at least an established castle on the hilltop by then. From 1146, the area was established as the capital of the County Palatine of Tübingen under Count Hugo V, who was promoted to Count Palatine as Hugo I in that year. By 1231, Tübingen was a civitas, indicating it had recognition by the Crown of civil liberties and a court system. 30 years later, an Augustinian monastery was established in the city by Pope Alexander IV, either shortly before or as a reaction to his death. 10 years later, a Franciscan monastery was also founded, followed 28 years later in 1300 by a Latin school, an institution that still exists to today as the Ulan Gymnasium, albeit now in the buildings to the southern side of the Neckar. In 1342, the county Palatine was sold to Ulrich III, Count of Württemberg, and the city was incorporated into the county of Württemberg. The latter part of the 15th century saw the construction of St George's Collegiate Church and the founding of the Eberhard Karls University, the latter founded by Duke Eberhard I, and the former going on to house his mortal remains following his death in 1496. The church still occupies the centre of the Holzmarkt, close to the very centre of the ancient city, whilst the university has, amongst many other buildings, moved into the castle. The 30 Years' War wasn't kind to the city. Originally a Lutheran town, it was occupied for 3 years by the Catholic League, and then at a later stage by the Swedes, and finally in the last years of the war by the French. During these periods, the city was also devastated by plague. In 1789, parts of the old town burned down in a major fire that ripped through the heart of the old city, though the city was restored to the original style in the years afterwards. It wasn't until the start of the 19th century the city finally grew beyond its original medieval borders, spreading out across the river and in 1861 to the site of a new train station as Tübingen was connected to the Royal Württemberg State Railways network. The city was a regional stronghold of National Socialism before Hitler's ascent to power, and the university had become a leading centre for research in dubious areas of science and humanities that would go on to inform the genocidal policies of the Nazi regime. On Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1938, Nazi stormtroopers burned Tübingen synagogue to the ground. Of the 23 members of the synagogue who remained in the city at the outbreak of war, just 2 would survive the Holocaust. Being just an academic centre, albeit an ardent Nazi one, and away from the main points of political power in Berlin and Berchtesgaden, the city survived World War II with only slight damage, having suffered just 3 bombing raids. In 1945, the town surrendered to French forces who would remain as the city fell into the French sector of Germany until the forming of a German Federal Republic in 1949. French soldiers continued to be stationed in the city until the end of the Cold War in 1991 as an Allied garrison. In 1946, Tübingen became the capital of the consolidated state of Württemberg-Hohenzollern, but its time as state capital was short, lasting just 6 years, until it lost that role to its larger neighbour and traditional rival for local power, Stuttgart, as further consolidation saw the creation of the federal state of Baden-Württemberg. With such a young and heavily student population, it's perhaps unsurprising that the city has been a centre for Green politics, with the Green Party being the largest party in local councils since the start of the 21st century. The city was the first in Germany to introduce a tax on disposable food packaging in 2022 and aims to be climate neutral by 2030. Occupying the top of the hill in the centre of the city, Schloss Hohentübingen was founded sometime around 1037, though other than the occasional mention in documents from the late 11th and through the 12th century, there is little reference to it. In 1342, the indebted Counts Palatine of Tübingen sold the town and castle to the Counts and later Dukes of Württemberg, who used Hohentübingen as their residence alongside the other Schlosses in Stuttgart and Urach. Under Duke Ulrich, a major rebuilding of the castle was undertaken starting in 1507. Works were suspended in 1519 after the Duke was expelled from his lands following an attack on the imperial city of Reutlingen. Works wouldn't restart again until 1533, a year before Ulrich successfully regained his lands. Works on the castle were mostly completed by 1550. At the start of the 17th century, the site was expanded and further fortifications were added, which all then needed to be repaired and rebuilt following the 30 Years' War. For decades, the castle had been the secondary residence of the Dukes of Württemberg behind Stuttgart, but in the early 18th century a new royal palace was built at Ludwigsburg, and both cities' castles lost their importance. In 1752, an astronomical observatory was built on the northeastern tower and signalled the start of a new purpose for the castle complex as a centre for science. Johann Gottlieb Bernberger was appointed as a professor in the castle in 1798 and worked to establish the Württemberg State Survey within the castle, and Hohentübingen became the 0 point for the cartography of Württemberg. With science now in control of the castle, it didn't take long for the castle complex to be handed over by the House of Württemberg to the University of Tübingen that the Duke's ancestors had founded. The university moved in over a number of years between 1804 and 1816, with additional facilities added over the following decades. The university has an unsettling history during the Nazi era, with a chair for racial hygiene being established and dubious research conducted at the university being used as a flimsy basis for the regime's genocidal ideology. The university played a leading role in efforts to legitimise the policies of the Third Reich as scientific. Even before the 1933 general election and Hitler's seizure of the German state, there were virtually no Jewish faculty or students at the university, with anti-Semitism widespread at the university amongst both professors and students. Having cleared the ranks and denazified following the end of the war, the university appointed a new chair in dogmatic theology in 1966, one Joseph Ratzinger. When your appointee later goes on to become Pope Benedict XVI, it would suggest that things might have turned a corner. Though the rebound may have gone too far by the early 1970s. Coming out of the German student movement and the protests of 1968, which made an issue of the perceived continuities between the West German state and the Hitler regime, a graduate of the university, Gudrun Enslin, led her Red Army faction, also known as the Baader-Meinhof Gang, in a nationwide campaign of bombings and assassinations. Starting in 1970 and continuing until 1994, the university undertook the first full fundamental renovation of the castle complex in nearly 500 years, with major repairs carried out and, where necessary, modifications made to the building for it to be able to accommodate the needs of a modern university, in particular with floors being strengthened to support the weight of equipment that the building was never designed to hold, including the rapidly expanding library, which were threatening to overwhelm the mostly medieval structure. As the university has continued to expand, it became necessary to build additional campuses at other locations across the city, including the main campus, library and faculty buildings to the northeast of the Old Town in the Wilhelmstrasse area of the city, leaving the castle now home to smaller humanities departments, as well as the university's museum. The university has multiple different collections within its museum, but many are not on regular display. Within the castle, the building houses two connected museums, the Museum of Ancient Cultures and the Museum of World Cultures, the former focusing on archaeological finds from the region, and the latter including substantial Egyptian collections, as well as a spectacular cast hall that houses many plaster casts of ancient sculptures. The museum is unique in being the only university museum in the world to hold artefacts from two different UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Vogelherd Cave is located in the Swabian Jura mountains range some 85 kilometres east of Tübingen and forms part of UNESCO's Caves and Ice Age Art in the Swabian Jura. The caves came to prominence in 1931 when miniature sculptures and fragments of bone flutes carved from mammoth ivory were discovered in the caves and attributed to paleo-humans of the Aurignacian culture dating to around 40,000 years old, making them amongst the oldest works of art of mankind and, apart from the human voice, the oldest musical instruments ever discovered. Today, the museum is home to a dozen of these pieces, including the wild horse, which is a symbol of the museum. The early prehistory collection includes finds from wetland settlements which form part of UNESCO's prehistoric pile dwellings around the Alps. There are a collection of 111 sites dotted across the alpine regions of modern-day Switzerland, Italy, Germany, France, Austria and Slovenia. Of the 18 sites in Germany, 15 are located in Baden-Württemberg, with remaining 3 in neighbouring Bavaria. The relics mainly date from the late Neolithic age through the Bronze Age and into the Iron Age. The humid environments of areas provided ideal conditions for the preservation of organic material, such as wood, plant remains and textiles that would otherwise have decayed away. Beyond the UNESCO-related collections, the museum houses collections of pottery and artefacts from the classical civilizations of the Mediterranean. There is a substantial Egyptian collection which includes the sacrificial chamber of Seshem-Nefer III from the necropolis of Giza. Seshem-Nefer was an official and priest from the 5th dynasty era of Egypt, around 2500 to 2350 BCE. His tomb was discovered in 1910 during excavations financed by Stuttgart-based soap entrepreneur and antique lover Ernst von Sieglen and undertaken by renowned German Egyptologist Georg Steindorf. In 1911, von Sieglen acquired the chamber and donated it to the university. The chamber is 3.65 metres long, 1.45 metres wide and 2.57 metres high, with intricate painted relief images covering most of the walls. Each wall consists of 2 or 3 large blocks which don't meet at the corners but are connected by incorporated angled pieces. The rest of the collection includes preserved papyrus fragments as well as intricately decorated sarcophagi. The largest hall in the museum is the Cast Gallery, which houses a large number of casts of ancient sculptures from the regular size to the gigantic. Also preserved in the castle is a former chemistry laboratory which was built into the former castle kitchen. It's hailed as one of the birthplaces of the discipline of biochemistry and is the location of the discovery of both hemoglobin and in 1869 the discovery by Swiss physician Friedrich Miescher of nucleic acid, the key ingredient of DNA and RNA. Located a couple of kilometres from the castle in the hills on the edge of the city are the university's Botanical Gardens. The gardens were originally located close to the old town, and the Alter Botanischer Garten is still a large park in the centre of the city, though today it's just a municipal park with large expanses of grass and trees rather than full gardens. The gardens relocated to the new site on the edge of town in 1969 as part of a major new sciences campus. The gardens can trace their history back to 1535 when medicinal plants were first grown by a professor of medicine at the university, Leonhard Fuchs. Under the direction of Eberhard III, Duke of Württemberg, a hortus medicus was created in 1663 with a university gardener appointed 3 years later. The first greenhouse was completed in 1774. King Frederick of Württemberg established a new garden in 1804 which grew substantially during the first half of the century. Within 5 years, the site contained 4 greenhouses and a lecture hall, with its first seed catalogue published in 1820. Further expansions took place throughout the 19th century, with additional neighbouring land being purchased, an institute building being constructed, and in 1886 the inauguration of a large palm house. With the construction of a new sciences faculty for the university in the hills on the outskirts of town, the new Botanical Garden was built, starting in 1969 with the planting of an arboretum at the top of the hill, before the construction of greenhouses in the 1970s, and then further expansion planting added down the hill during the 1980s. In 1987, the last of the greenhouses, the Canary Islands house, was added to the complex. Today, the gardens are planted in themed areas such as Asian, North American, Japanese, and more locally, Jura mountain plants, Swabian cottage garden, and Swabian steppe and heath forests. Keeping back to their roots, there is still an area of medicinal plants, including a herb garden reflecting the interests of today's pharmaceutical industry. The Alpine House houses a collection of mountain plants, primarily from the local Alpine region, but also from other mountainous areas globally. The Tropicarium was one of the first of the greenhouses to be built in the 1970s, and today houses plants from the tropical rainforests from around the world. Plants from the Americas and Oceania regions are planted around the edge of the greenhouse, whilst plants from the Old World occupy the centre of the building. A viewing platform to one side of the house allows you to look down on the rainforest canopy from above. The subtropical house contains plant species from South America, Africa, and Australia. The newest of the greenhouses, the Canary House or Canary Islands house, is filled with vegetation from Canary Islands. There's also a small display of succulents from South Africa. The neighbouring Succulentan house has succulents from across the globe, providing a good way of seeing how plants from the same family have adapted over tens of thousands of years to the different environments they find themselves in, whether that be the deserts of America or the arid lands of the Sahara. The gardens and university campus are around 3 kilometres from the centre of town and up a relatively steep hill, so catching a bus up here makes sense, but it's worth walking back into town as the walk takes you down through the woods behind the Botanical Gardens, and within them you come across the Landesmittelpunkt, the geographic centre of Baden-Württemberg. Back in the centre of town, and the other institution was founded during the reign of Eberhard I of Württemberg, and today home to his earthly remains, the Collegiate Church of St George, or Stiftskirche St Georg. The church was constructed in just 20 years between 1470 and 1490, in part due to the founding by a part of the university in the town. The church isn't the first constructed on this site, and during renovations in the 1960s, archaeological excavations were conducted which revealed the presence of 2 earlier Romanesque buildings on the site, an 11th century three-aisled basilica and a replacement building from around a century later. Construction of the current bell tower of the church was actually started around 60 years before works on the church itself started, with the first elements of the tower being laid down in 1411. Though with delays to construction, it was fittingly the last part of the building to be completed, with the tower not finally being completed with the addition of a wooden spire until 1590, some 100 years after completion of the rest of the church. From 1550 onwards, the choir, which had previously served as the university's assembly hall, became the new burial place of the Württemberg ducal family, with Ebhard being joined by 7 other members of his family, including Duke Ulrich, who undertook much of the works on the castle, his wife and their son and heir, Christoph, also Duke of Württemberg. Today, this area is also home to a model of a church which helps to get an overall view of the buildings, as the cramped streets outside make it difficult to truly see the shape and size of the building. The model even includes the viewing platform at the top of the tower. The latter being accessed via a flight of spiral stairs from the side of the choir up into the roof space above the nave, which you can walk across. To access the spiral stairs that lead you up to the base of the spire and that viewing platform for views out across Tübingen. Tübingen Hauptbahnhof is a transport hub for the region, but in 2025 only had one ICE train a day, which is an extension from Stuttgart of the regular Dresden to Leipzig, Hanover, Dortmund, Cologne, Mainz, Stuttgart service. All other trains are regional services within Baden-Württemberg, with a roughly half-hourly service to Stuttgart for its connections to the rest of the country. Buses 828 and X82 combine to provide a half-hourly service direct to Stuttgart Airport, taking about an hour to make the journey. Stuttgart Airport is the 6th busiest in Germany, a base for Eurowings, and with links to most Western European capitals, as well as many links to Turkey, to include the key hubs of London Heathrow, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Amsterdam Schiphol, Frankfurt, Munich, Copenhagen, and Istanbul.